You have almost certainly worn their clothing, and you have never heard their name.
Heard their name. We're talking about the Fisher family of San Francisco, who controlled roughly 83% of the insider-held shares of AAP, incorporated a massive combined stake worth well over $8 billion. Yet they operate behind an impressive wall of Delaware limited partnerships and family trusts that has kept them virtually invisible to the customers who have been buying and wearing their products for 50 years. Donald Fisher actually founded the company in 1969, simply because he couldn't find a pair of jeans that fit him. His wife Doris came up with the name. Together, they turned $63,000 into a sprawling retail empire that at its very peak operated over 4,000 stores and generated $16 billion in annual revenue, paying the family over $100 million a year just in dividends. So, on today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we are examining the most invisible billion-dollar family in the world of American retail. The dynasty that pretty much invented the specialty store category, built one of the world's most impressive art collections, and purchased 440,000 acres of California redwood forest, all while relocating a Major League Baseball franchise. And the whole time, nobody outside of San Francisco knew who they were. The Fisher family's grip on Gap Incorporated is so incredibly concentrated that it feels more like a private family business, just wearing the legal costume of a public corporation. As of early 2026, the four main family members, matriarch Doris Fisher and her three sons, Robert, William, and John, collectively hold approximately 308 million shares of Gap stock, which represents a staggering 83% of all insider-held shares. William Sidney Fisher is the single largest individual shareholder, holding about 95.2 million shares that are worth $2.57 billion. His brother John holds about 92.4 million shares worth $2.5 billion. Robert holds 64.5 million shares worth $1.74 billion. And Doris holds 56.5 million shares worth $1.53 billion, a combined stake that exceeds $8 billion at Gap's current market capitalization of around $10 billion. The family made this control official through Fisher Holdings LPA, Delaware limited partnership they formed back in August of 2004, whose stated goal was to hold, manage, and vote as a single powerful block all the family's shares of Gap stock, guaranteeing them an ongoing voice in the management and direction of Gap Inc. This was a clever governance vehicle that gave the three sons total voting control as general partners, while Don and Doris assumed limited partner status. At the absolute height of Gap's success, during the late 90s and early 2000s, the family was receiving more than $100 million per year from dividends alone. That's a passive income stream so enormous that the company's retail business was, from the family's view, primarily just a machine for generating huge quarterly cash distributions. The family's deeper investment portfolio is far too diversified for this one video. It includes 440,000 acres of California timberland, making them the 26th largest private landowner in the United States, and a contemporary art collection of over 1,100 works, which now takes up 40% of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's exhibition space. More on that is in our free Substack newsletter. We now look at how a real estate developer who simply couldn't find jeans with a 31-inch inseam managed to build a dynasty that dressed a generation of Americans and then disappeared behind a wall of legal structures so airtight that most consumers have never once connected that name Fisher with the iconic brand Gap. The family fortune has fluctuated wildly along with the stock price, from about $15 billion at the 2014 peak down to $4.7 billion during a mid-2017 collapse to $8.9 billion during the failed 2019 Old Navy spin-off, which Robert Fisher himself actually canceled while acting as interim CEO in January 2020, citing cost and complexity. But their governance structure guarantees that no matter what the stock price does, the Fishers ultimately decide what happens to their company. Since 2023, there have been genuine signs of stabilization under CEO Richard Dixon, who has pursued a full brand reset, which is focused on digital engagement, new marketing collaborations, and operational efficiency. Gap's net sales in the third quarter of fiscal 2025 climbed to approximately $3.94 billion, and Dixon told CNBC in March 2026 that the company's next critical phase of its turnaround is all about building real momentum. Donald George Fisher was born on September 3rd, 1928 in San Francisco, the son of a Jewish family. His father, Sidney, was a cabinet maker and a small businessman, and Donald attended the University of California, Berkeley, where he graduated in 1950 with a bachelor's degree and was also a star water polo player. After college, he jumped into real estate development eventually, running the Fisher Property Investment Company and leasing out commercial properties and showroom spaces all across San Francisco. It was while leasing space to a Levi Strauss storefront in one of his buildings that he first encountered the simple sizing problem that would completely define his entire subsequent career. He tried to buy a pair of Levi's jeans and then discovered he was unable to find his size anywhere. He had a 31-inch inseam, and every store he checked only stocked 30-inch, and 32-inch options with absolutely nothing in between. It was a gap in the market so mundane, yet so universal that it became the seed for a multi-billion-dollar fashion dynasty. Doris Lee Feigenbaum was born August 23rd, 1931, also in San Francisco into a prominent Jewish family. Her father, B. Joseph Feigenbaum, was a Harvard-trained lawyer and a California state legislator, and she graduated from Stanford University, where she was one of the very first women to earn a degree in economics. The two had actually known each other since childhood, and they married in 1953. And together they raised 3 sons, Robert, William, and John. It was actually Doris who named the store, which Don had wanted to, called Pants and Discs, a nod to their plan to sell both Levi's and LP records, but Doris completely overruled him, suggesting they, instead, reference the cultural generation gap that was dividing young Americans from their parents in the late 1960s. It was a naming decision so consequential that it would define one of the most recognized retail brands in the world for the next half a century. The couple managed to raise $63,000, secured a storefront at 1950 Ocean Avenue near San Francisco State College, and opened up for business on August 21st, 1969. The merchandise consisted of every size, style, and color of Levi's jeans, available all neatly arranged in wall cubicles organized by size, which was a radical concept for the time, plus a cool selection of vinyl records to attract their 12 to 25-year-old target demographic. Within just 1 year, the store earned $2 million in profit. The concept was obviously correct. Give customers exactly what they want in every size, and organize it so they can find it. As that modeled a comprehensive specialty retailer was so novel that Don Fisher is widely credited with literally inventing the specialty retail category itself, a distinction that business historians have preserved, even as the company he had founded has struggled badly to maintain relevance in the decades since its peak. His famous phrase, "change or fail," which he attributed to lessons that he learned from his father, would become the operating philosophy he passed down to his 3 sons. And the deep irony of the company's subsequent struggles would be that the Fishers themselves proved far better at changing their investment portfolio than changing the retail formula that made them so incredibly rich. The Fishers expanded aggressively all through the early 1970s. By 71, they had established corporate headquarters in Burlingame, California, and in 72, they launched their own private label clothing line, phasing out their dependence on Levi's products. It was a strategically courageous move that sacrificed their main attraction for the far greater margins and brand loyalty that controlling their own product lines would ultimately generate. The company went public In 1976, an event that transformed the Fishers from successful small business owners into genuinely wealthy people. While they retained overwhelming voting control by 75, even before the IPO annual sales had already soared to around $97 million. And Don Fisher, interviewed years later, claimed he had always envisioned a national chain rather than just a local specialty store. Change or fail was a motto he said he learned directly from his father, the single most consequential decision in Gap's corporate history was the 1983 hiring of Millard Mickey Drexler as company president. He was a Bronx-born merchant who had previously turned around the Ann Taylor chain and who brought an almost savant-like ability to understand precisely what American consumers wanted to wear. That very same year, Don Fisher acquired Banana Republic, a two-store safari and travel-themed retailer in Mill Valley, California with annual sales of just $10 million, which Drexler totally refashioned into a mainstream luxury casual brand that became by the mid-90s Gap Inc.'s most profitable division. Under Drexler, Gap's signature aesthetic of clean basics in neutral, colors khakis, Oxford shirts and fitted t-shirts became the defining wardrobe of the aspirational middle class. America, and the Fall into the Gap advertising campaign became one of the most enduring slogans in American retail history. Then Gap launched Old Navy in 1994, a value-oriented sibling brand targeting budget-conscious families that became one of the fastest retail concepts to ever reach $1 billion in sales. A brand within a brand that demonstrated the Fisher's willingness to cannibalize their own market position just to capture a larger share of the American closet. By the late 90s, Gap Inc. operated over 4,200 stores across Gap, Old Navy, and Banana Republic and the Fisher. Family stock was worth roughly $15 billion at the company's absolute peak, the largest fortune ever built from a 31-inch inseam that nobody could find. Drexler was then fired in 2002 after the company reported its largest ever store sales. Decline of 24%. It was the direct result of his decision to push Gap toward trendier styles that alienated its core basics buying customer. And the decade that followed brought a revolving door of CEOs and an identity crisis. So, the fallout was so bad, it became a Harvard Business School case study. And a disastrous 2010 logo redesign lasted just a single week, before a massive public outcry forced them to backtrack. The company's global ambitions also started shrinking fast when Gap exited the United Kingdom and Ireland back in 2021, closing all 81 of their company-owned stores and switching over to a franchise model in France and Italy. This was a stunning retreat from the very global expansion that William Fisher himself spearheaded back in the 90s and that once carried the incredible promise that the signature Gap look would outfit not just America, but literally the entire world. The second generation of the Fisher fortune now operates where high finance, real estate, and powerful private equity all intersect, professional sports and major philanthropy. And each of the sons has masterfully carved out his own distinct empire, extending the family's influence far beyond the original retail empire their parents created. Robert Joseph Fisher, who was born in 1954, is the eldest son and the family member most visibly connected to Gap's continuing corporate governance. He first attended Princeton for his undergraduate degree and Stanford Business School for his MBA, setting a prestigious academic template that his Win Ethfronpas One brothers would follow precisely. He joined Gap in 1980 as a store manager, working up through roles that included becoming president of Banana Republic, chief financial officer, chief operating officer, and then finally, president of the entire Gap Stores division. Bob actually stepped into the top CEO job twice during major moments of crisis, serving as interim CEO in 2007 during a leadership vacuum and again from 2019 to 2020 when Art Peck was suddenly ousted due to declining sales. He used both stints to simply stabilize the company and recruit a permanent leader rather than trying to install himself in the role. This pattern of stewardship clearly reflects the family's preference for governance control, not operational involvement. William Sidney Fisher, born in 1958, is by far the most internationally minded. He led Gap's huge international expansion back in the 90s, opening stores across Canada, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and also in Japan. As president of its international division, then in 2001, he founded Manzanita Capital, a prominent London-based private equity firm that zeroes in on branded luxury companies across Europe, focusing on consumer goods and retail. His wife, Sakurako Fisher, born over in Japan to an American father and a Japanese mother, serves as a president of the prestigious San Francisco Symphony, a major cultural leadership role that plants the Fisher family squarely at the center of Bay Area high society, even as the family itself remains largely invisible to the wider public. John Joseph Fisher, who was born in 1961, is the youngest and the family's main investment manager through Pisces, incorporated the firm he founded back in 1992. He is also a founding partner of Sansom Partners, which handles the family's timber and hotel investments. He holds minority ownership stakes in Major League Soccer's San Jose Earthquakes and also Scotland's legendary Glasgow Celtic Football Club, and he is the most publicly criticized of all three brothers, mainly because of his deeply controversial ownership of the Oakland Athletics baseball team, which he acquired in 2005 for around $180 million. His controversial tenure as owner generated far more sustained public anger than literally any other Fisher family scandal. He immediately stripped the team of its high salary. Players allowed the roster to deteriorate into total irrelevance and finally engineered the deeply unpopular relocation of the franchise over to Las Vegas, a move the MLB approved after it waived the standard $500 million relocation fee. Oakland fans were absolutely furious with his critics, arguing Fisher deliberately sabotaged the franchise just to make staying in Oakland seem commercially impossible. And his relative obscurity made the relocation even more infuriating for the local fans who had absolutely no established connection to him as a civic figure, because to Oakland, he was simply a faceless stranger who suddenly moved their beloved team. The Fishers also happened to be one of the largest private landowners in the entire United States, with control over around 440,000 acres of forest, mostly coastal redwood timberland, located in Humboldt, Mendocino, and Sonoma counties of Northern California. This massive investment began back in 1998 when the family, through its firm Sansom Partners, paid approximately $230 million to buy 350 square miles of timberlands from Louisiana Pacific Corporation, making them the largest private owner of coastal redwood forest in recorded history. The huge acquisition immediately tangled them up in the bitter timber wars of Northern California. Environmental groups quickly accused the Fisher-owned Mendocino Redwood Company of just continuing the destructive clear-cutting practices inherited from Louisiana Pacific, with plans to clear-cut 418 acres in the Elk Creek area and for the continued use of herbicides just to suppress any non-conifer growth. A 2000 Wall Street Journal investigation revealed the family name emblazoned on protest signs at the Fancy Natural Resources Defense Council Gala. This created a truly stunning irony given their status at the same time as major NRDC donors and board members, with Bob Fisher actually serving on the NRDC board for over 2 decades, all while the company that his family controlled was battling in court to implement controversial logging. These were plans that environmental groups claimed would absolutely devastate wetlands and old-growth habitats. But among the most incredible Fisher assets is their contemporary art collection, widely seen as one of the greatest private collections on the planet. Donald and Doris started collecting back in the mid-70s initially, just purchasing prints to decorate Gap's corporate offices. But over 4 decades, they built a truly massive collection of artworks, featuring works by 185 different artists. They operated by one simple self-imposed rule: they would never buy a piece unless both of them absolutely loved it. The collection is packed with major works from Alexander Calder Ellsworth, Kelly Anselm, Kiefer, and Agnes, Martin Gerhard Richter, Richard Serra, and of course, Andy Warhol. It is estimated to be as valuable as Doris Fisher's entire stake in Gay P itself. After Dawn's death in 2009, Doris orchestrated a landmark 100-year loan agreement with the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, placing the collection at SF MoMA in exchange for a new 60,000 square foot wing that the family helped pay for. The Fisher Collection galleries today span more than 40% of the museum's total exhibition. Space and agreement described as totally unprecedented in the museum world. The family also owned one of the most storied private estates in all of Silicon Valley, an 8-acre compound on Atherton Avenue in Atherton, the wealthiest zip code in America. They bought it in 1975 for only $211,000, expanding it over almost 5 decades into a massive compound with multiple homes, perfectly manicured gardens, and a museum-quality sculpture garden showcasing works from their collection. Doris sold the whole thing in 2024 for a combined $63.5 million in 3 transactions. The main 6-acre parcel with its 4,200 square foot home sold for $32 million, the sculpture garden parcel for $16 million, and a Tudor style home on the third parcel sold for $15.5 million. But the Fisher family's near total obscurity is not an accident. It is a deliberate posture they've maintained for 2 generations using opaque Delaware. Partnerships, complex family, trusts a consistent refusal to ever engage with the media, and the structural decision to always keep the family name off of every store advertisement and consumer-facing product the company makes. The controversies that managed to breach this wall of privacy are revealing precisely because this powerful family had no established public identity to absorb the blow. The sweatshop scandals of the 90s and 2000s, including an $11.25 million settlement for 30,000 garment workers on the island of Saipan, and the 2007 exposure of child labor inside Gap subcontractor factories in India, where children in Delhi were discovered making Gap brand clothing, landed on a family that had never built the kind of public goodwill that might have softened that impact. An investigation later revealed that Doris and her 3 sons had collectively donated almost $9 million to Americans for Job Security, a dark money nonprofit that actively opposed Barack Obama's 2012 re-election and was associated with Charles Schwab and other prominent right-wing donors, which even included the DeVos family. This revelation sparked disproportionate outrage because the Fishers had carefully cultivated this image of nonpartisan civic philanthropy, which made the partisan giving feel like a betrayal. In 2006, John Fisher gave $85,000 to All Children Matter, a school privatization PAC in Ohio. That group was later fined $5.2 million for illegally funneling contributions through out-of-state dark money networks. This created enormous tension with the family's public image as major education, philanthropists, and environmental funders. Yet despite all this, the Fishers' education philanthropy has been genuinely transformative. Over the years, Donald and Doris donated more than $70 million to the Knowledge is Power program, helping build KIPP into the single largest charter school network in the United States with over 224 schools, serving nearly 100,000 students across 20 different states. This was a network that Don Fisher personally chaired and helped build with a retail CEO's discipline for structure replications and strict performance accountability. Donald Fisher passed away on September 27, 2009 in San Francisco. He was 81 and had a long battle with cancer. And the company, whose brand was reset under CEO, Richard Dixon, has since recovered to about $10 billion in market capitalization as of April 2026. That's a meaningful improvement from its lowest point, though still well below the family's $15 billion stock peak. At 94, Doris Fisher remains the powerful family matriarch, a woman Forbes listed as the 8th richest self-made woman in America, Her name is on museum galleries at SF MoMA and on KIP fellowships across 20 states. But it's never deliberately put on the stores that generated all that wealth. Because the Fishers understood right from the very beginning that the most powerful and durable form of control is the kind that nobody ever sees. A family whose name appears nowhere can never be forced to answer for any of it. And now we'd really love to hear from you in the comments. Should a family that controls? How can 83% of a public company's insider shares be kept secret from the very consumers who made them rich? Let's look closer. We're looking forward to the conversation below, and thanks for joining us on another episode of Old Money Luxury. Cheers!